Welcome, everyone, to today's LinkedIn Live. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host, moderator. I'm going to introduce our guests in a second. Our topic today, I'm excited about this one. This is going to be fun. Productive conflict, smarter decisions in an AI-driven world. I love both AI. I also love conflict, so I'm going to be curious to see how this one goes. I'm excited about the conversation. I'm excited about our guests. Before I do that, though, for those watching, we are streaming both on LinkedIn and on YouTube. If you are on LinkedIn, you want to leave a question or comment, go ahead and put it in the sessions there. We'll watch that. We'll weave them into the conversation as we get it. I'm not going to be watching the YouTube comments. So if you have a comment and you want to do it live, jump over to LinkedIn and put them there. If you are watching the replay, go ahead and leave comments, questions on either of those platforms. We'll watch those in the coming days and weeks, and we'll respond to there. So even if you're watching the replay, go ahead and engage, and we'll pick those up. So let me introduce our guests. First up, I've got Divya Parekh. She is a business relationship and growth strategist. She is an AI-focused advisor. She's also a best-selling author and helps leaders build scalable, human-centered organizations. She has a background in neuroscience and systems thinking, and she works with executives and organizations on how to integrate AI while maintaining connection, purpose, and human-centered leadership. With all that, Divya, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Bruce.
Great to have you. Next up, I've got Shelby Long. She is a communication strategist, professional speaker. She's president of a strategic advisory firm focused on helping businesses scale and exit. She's a former college debate champion and coach, and she specializes in helping leadership teams use structured debate and communication to improve decision-making and avoid costly mistakes. With all that, Shelby, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here. I'm always excited to talk about conflict.
Yeah, no, good, because I think that is the topic, and I think that is something that a lot of leaders and leadership teams honestly struggle with. So I think there's some good takeaways here. So why don't we kind of get into it? I would love to actually start with that. Like when we talk about conflict, I would love to give you your kind of framing in terms of conflict, the purpose of conflict, where conflict can kind of go right, where it can go wrong. How do you kind of frame that, particularly when working with leaders? Divya, why don't we start with you on this one?
Absolutely. So first of all, there is this myth that conflict is bad. Yeah. So the way I look at it is that when we are sitting down, and as a matter of fact, just kind of running a leadership cohort, is that when you look at conflict is good. Conflict is going to mirror what is wrong or where are the disagreements.
Yeah.
And when we go about it that way, then it's something that we can work on rather than coming in with a mindset that, oh, it's so wrong, and getting emotionally depleted and getting your energy completely out of the way even before you come to the table.
Mm-hmm. Shelby, what's your take, or how do you frame conflict or think about conflict in leadership?
I think, first of all, it's something that leaders need to know how to handle. And it's not something to be managed. It's really something to be used, because it's going to exist. We perform tasks. We talk about different solutions. People have different opinions. It's not just one person leading a company. There's lots of things. So it does exist. And it's something that it's really something that thriving organizations are taking advantage of this conflict and creating more innovation. I think where we're stuck is, especially in the age of AI, and we've gone through this transition in the past 30 years, is that we can solve our problems by typing something into a chat machine, right? Yeah, exactly. So we don't have to talk to anybody. Yeah. And we don't have to solve problems with anybody else. And so when we do solve problems with other people, or when we're put in the situation where we're in a think tank or we're in a boardroom and we're talking about ways to create solutions together, people don't know how to do that. Yeah. And so I think it's something that's foreign to people, and people just generally don't like. I mean, I was a communication professor for 20 years. Yeah. And even over those 20 years with the youth, people just don't like speaking to each other. And I think a lot of that comes down to the person. emotional involvement and they
Uh-huh.
feel judged and people are afraid to tell their opinion. And we're in such a polarized society. Some people are afraid to speak up. So I think
Yeah.
it's a systemic problem, but it's also something that's kind of in our nature. And it's really starting to affect the way that we work in
Yeah.
organizations. So
Yeah, it is shaping a lot of organizational cultures and team cultures. Yeah, I always
absolutely.
say there's like, good conflict is good, bad conflict is bad. This is kind of the way I frame
Yeah.
it, and I think that is it. It's one of the things that I think good teams can discern between those things and know how to avoid bad conflict, but they really know how to leverage good conflict. And I would say like good teams disagree then commit, right? Like you have to have this agreement before you can get to commitment, and you can't
Mhm.
get to accountability before you commitment. So it is fundamental, I think, for most high performance teams. But I'm curious in this kind of good conflict, bad conflict, like how would you kind of define the two, or how would you organize the two in terms of when you're looking at a team or working with leaders? Like how do you steer them, or how do you help them decipher the look, this is actually going to be healthy, helpful conflict versus like, let's stay away from this type of conflict. Shelby, I'd love to have you start on that one.
Yeah, I think it comes down to it becoming personal or people
Huh?
feeling that conflict is personal. And I think that's I think many people feel that if they are challenged or if the I think it kind of goes back to the culture of the organization too. If there's a culture of feedback, a culture of dialogue and conversation, and
Hmm.
it's normal to do that, I think that has something that has a great effect on the conversations that we can have. But if that doesn't exist, and then when somebody's asked their questions, people go into defensive mode,
Yeah.
and then they get defensive, and it's nothing supportive is happening. It's passive, and everybody's defensive, and it's just kind of destructive. So it can devolve into that destruction. Leaders can guide their teams through that conflict and bring everybody back to the table, make sure that we're having these open conversations. But you've got to create the space for it. And then this is what I help teams with is you've got to create the space for it,
Yeah.
have these conversations, and then you've got to also you have to learn how to argue too.
Yeah. Oh,
It's arguments
argue. It's a skill.
arguments are not this. They're
Yeah.
like, I'm going to develop an argument. It's not just a claim that I throw out, but I'm going to support it with some evidence. And I'm
Uh-huh.
going to give you some reasoning of why it all ties together and why it makes a case for something. Generally, we're not a society that does that
Yeah.
anymore. It's not taught unless it's in argumentation classes, maybe,
Uh-huh.
it's something and we live in such a Twitter
Oh
filled
yeah. Don't get me started
universe
on
that
that. Yeah.
we have one-liner phrases that are making major decisions. And
Yeah.
it's a challenge. So I think there's a whole process. It's like creating the space for it, normalizing the discussion, but then also this is how we put it together and this is how we engage in arguments.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm a college debate coach. There is nothing better for me than a good conversation. And then I might lose or not have my opinion taken at the end of the day, but I'm going to go out and
Yeah.
shake hands and have a drink afterwards,
Yeah.
So it's always good to have those discussions.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say, like, one of the things I try to teach teams is it's not about winning or losing, right? It's about getting to better understanding and better options and better decision making, right? Like there's no winners or losers on a team in terms of good argument. All there is advancing our team's understanding and ability to make better, stronger decisions. Divya, give me your sense about how do you work with teams, or how do you work with leaders in terms of understanding, appropriate and inappropriate uses of conflict, or how do you help guide them in this process?
So Shelby brought together a very few good points. So, for example, she mentioned normalizing it. And that's
Mhm.
the key because so many times what happens is that, especially in today's culture where somebody says something and we talk about cancel culture,
Mhm.
that you did this or somebody did that, and that means that person is out. So, the key thing is that I always say that strike that cancel out, have counsel culture where you're coming to the table. And one of the key things, as both of y'all have mentioned, we have gone away from the roots of communication. We have forgotten how to communicate with each other without getting upset, without getting our egos involved. So one of the key things I've found is that as I work with teams is creating the agreements even before you come to the table. What are those ground rules?
Mm-hmm.
What is our shared goal? And then identifying the root cause as to where that conflict is coming from. Is it the ego? Because I'll tell you, 90% of the time when I worked with teams, it is battle of the ego. I call that game.
Uh-huh.
Is it a systemic problem? Is it a people interrelational problem? Or is it a process problem? Or where is the problem?
Yeah.
Even before you kind of come and find any solutions for it. And Bruce, as you talked about, once you have the root cause and once you have established ground rules, that respect is the key. We are going to have that human element of respect, warmth, and dignity. We're not going to put each other down.
Yeah.
One person talking at a time. So these are just some of the things that we kind of involve, and then looking at different options and coming up with solutions that are win-win, because there's going to be sometimes compromise. Sometimes you might have to accommodate.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you can collaborate. Sometimes it can be competing. So depending on the decision that needs to be made, the conflicts can be, for example, you cannot have kumbaya when there are time sensitive decisions that need to be made.
Yeah.
That could be just probably made by the board decision, but then creating that space and culture, being transparent about it, holding people accountable. I mean, there's so many nuances to it, but those are some of the elements that I've found to be successful.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from each of you in terms of some of these ground rules or context, like how do you create an environment which facilitates, enables, encourages constructive, productive conflict, and any kind of tricks or things that you've done with team just to kind of lay the groundwork on this. Shelby, anything there that you do typically?
Yeah. I've taken a deep dive into this past week. I wrote this article that says AI can't teach you charisma, and it can't. I mean, we can find all of these answers in AI, but AI can't teach you how to actually communicate and have a conversation. 70 to 90% of our communication is nonverbal. Yeah. So if I'm not looking you in the eye, if I'm not nodding my head, if I'm not using hand gestures, like all of that says something about how we're saying it. And it's really, and to kind of get to your question, it's not telling them what to do. It's actually doing it. And so I find it really helpful to run even before major decisions have to be made or before major conversations have to be made. Let's do a mock debate or a mock discussion about something, debate about something and we have different opinions about, like, who's your favorite football team or who's going to win the World Cup, like something where we can have conversations, but there's not a lot of stakes. And then when we start to learn the feeling of maybe having somebody that might disagree with me, but we can still have a conversation. And, it's a whole format of being able to create the space for it, but then actually engage in that discussion. And unless you're doing it and you're involved in it and you have somebody leading you through it, because that's, again, not something that we're taught to do. And I've debated for over 20 years and taught it for over 20 years. So it's second nature to me, but it's not second nature to 98% of the population. So it's being very active. And I think that's the biggest part of it, is being very active in it and making that happen and putting people in that kind of uncomfortable space. Yeah. And I love that. There's a lot of growth that happens there. And people are just generally afraid of that. And there might be anxiety around that. And of course you have to deal with all those things, but I don't know. You can't avoid it. Yeah. You got to in a situation where you're a little uncomfortable. We've all been in uncomfortable situations before when it comes to sales, when it comes to working with teams to try to get them to get along or produce something. We've all been in those uncomfortable conversations. So why not start with something and kind of teach them a format and then get them into a Then
Yeah.
let's have, then you can do the more facilitated discussions.
Yeah.
So that's
No,
kind
I
of
love
my
the
method.
idea.
Or-
Yeah, I love the idea of training. I do one of the things I typically take leadership teams on retreats, and I'll work with them for multi-day sessions and stuff. And I always start with a game, and the games are designed to get them to have to compete or have to be in
Mhm.
conflict. Like I'll do one with the Monty Hall problem, and I get the CEO up there, and they've got to choose, and then they've got to go to their team to get advice, and and the team has to start debating, and they have to start conflicting. But the whole point is that I want to get them playing with the whole idea of debate and conflict and disagreeing with each other and like having to make points and having to explain themselves and justify their positions and stuff
Yeah,
in a very low stakes kind of fun way, because it's a muscle, right? Like, and if you can
it
get
is.
them exercising that muscle, then we're kind of warmed up. Now we can start talking about things that actually have stakes to them, right? Like it's
Right.
easy to do when it's just games and fun, but it ends up being really important to kind of prime the pump for them in terms of then being able to tackle the big ones. Because if you just go into it
Absolutely.
cold,
Going
like
into it
everyone's gonna have
cold,
to
you're not going to get the conversation, and you're
Yeah.
not going to get the participation
Yeah.
that you want. And
Exactly.
so
Divya, what do
it's
you
gotta do
do
it.
to kind of bring some of this or help teams create the right environment, kind of be able to approach this effectively? Any strategies that you have?
Oh, very much along the same lines. We actually, I have my teams come up with the games. So we divide them into 2 to 3 teams, and where they're going to be competing, and they each kind of bring in the game that we are going to get started off on the conflict debate, where they will be competing with each other. And then they have to make a decision around the game that everybody's going to be using. And after that, I have them. And of course, one thing I'll share is that having food in the room,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, food breaks barriers like nothing else, going back to the
100%.
roots.
Yeah.
So definitely, whoever the sponsor is, good food, breakfast, lunch, and of course, coffee, and making them comfortable.
Yeah.
And then once they have that game going on, then the teams have to give each other feedback. And we do like literally like we'll have like, okay, these are the criteria. Similarly, like what we would be using for the actual conflict is ranking them on clarity, context, on creativity, and presentation, and all of that. And then they have to give each other feedback. So they have to give both positive and critical feedback. I don't call it criticism or anything like that. I say critical feedback that will help them grow. So what happens is that they are becoming comfortable with the discomfort, because people are not comfortable telling each other anything. It's always, oh yeah, this is good. This was good. Okay, this was good, but where could they improve? What could have been different? What could have made it more impactful? What could have made it more effective? And once they're in there, then of course, as part of the playing, we set the ground rules as well. And then you go to the actual conflict.
Yeah.
And then one of the things I've really found useful is that we use doodling, where everybody comes and like draws how they're feeling. We don't say it. You have to show. And then even the conflict, like, okay, this is our goal. Where are we going? And that gets the engagement, because it becomes fun rather than having those verbose, highly charged atmospheres.
Yeah. So I want to get into AI, because I know that one of the things we want to chat about is how AI is affecting all this. I'm curious, where have you seen teams or leaders use AI around this whole kind of, engaging in these debates, or, coming to the table with, with a clear agenda, position, evidence, things like that? Where have you seen it work? Where have you seen some challenges? Shelby, let's start with you on this one. Like, what's been your experience in AI in this whole topic?
Yeah, I kind of talked about it before. I think AI provides us this incredible tool. I use it. My speakers company, everybody uses it, or you should use it if you're not. I know there's some companies that are not, and they're still anti. But I think I think it's altered our decision-making process. And I do think while you can have more immediate answers, and you can have your workflows all put together, you can even have a coach that tells you need to do something else. All of those things are great, but I think I have seen it take a real impact on you can have the problem solved, but you're not solving them together.
Yeah.
And I think it's taken away from that. I think so. What I work with teams on is how do we use these tools? Because we also know that using the AI tools becomes a lot more clear, and you produce a lot better product when you are more clear on what you're asking it to do and what you're telling it to do. So knowing how to build a good argument, or knowing how to use some evidence and some reasoning in what you're asking it to do, produces so much better result than just a one-liner question. So it's a way to engage and re-engage your brand, but it also, we've got to balance that. And that's what I've worked with teams on, balancing that with the decisions that we're making as leadership teams, the decisions that we're making as a company.
Yeah.
Being critical. I think there's such an important piece about being a devil's advocate too. And maybe you have somebody produce a workflow or produce whatever, but let's talk about it and let's explore why this is good or why it's bad and why it should be different, why we should add something else into it. Creating a dialogue around it, I think, is one of the most important things for the companies. And, I've worked with companies in change management too. It's like the amount of change that has happened in the past 6 months, 12 months has been insane. It's been so fast, and letting people go. But and people don't even know how to train AI because it's changing so quickly.
Exactly.
And I'm not an expert in that space. I'm interested to hear more about that, but it's, you've also got to train your people to communicate through that and not be scared of all the changes that are happening, because people are fearing that their jobs are going to disappear.
Well, because some of them are.
Some of them are. And, there's this tension around that. And I think that's as a leader in an organization, we've got to calm your culture and talk about how to use your teams to be able to create these solutions. We talk about creating ground rules, particularly in a change management space. If you're changing, altering, shifting anything in your company and you have your leadership teams involved, the most important thing is that you have a dialogue about it and you have them help create the rules around it. That's a way to empower it. So
you kind of a good one, which I find is very similar. It's a little different, but is this whole critical thinking aspect. It's one of the key kind of skills I find in leadership is critical thinking. And where I find a lot of leaders kind of misstep in AI is they use AI to kind of outsource the decision. It's like, hey, tell me what I should do, rather than using it as a critical thinking tool, is saying, help me work through this issue together. And like, I actually have a whole Claude project, which I call Devil's Advocate. And I go to that project, which I go like, say, hey, look, all right, I'm dealing with this thing. I want you, literally, it's trained to be the devil's advocate, and it challenges me. And it's the whole point there is I want something that is going to sharpen my thinking, catch me on my own kind of flaws and how I'm thinking about it, bring up evidence I haven't considered, because I think that's really what I'm trying to do is sharpen my kind of whole approach to the argument. And I don't need someone to just reinforce my own biases. I need something that's going to challenge me and push me forward on that. And I think a lot of leaders, they're one, I don't think they're kind of thinking about critical thinking, right? They don't understand necessarily what critical thinking is, but then so they outsource it rather than using it as a tool as part of the process. Divya, what's your, in terms of AI and decision making and debate and conflict, how has this come up for you and the people that you've worked with?
Well, it has come up in very, very different ways, as you all mentioned, that it has been outsourcing.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that people want immediate answers. And unfortunately, as we go from yesterday, we were talking about the intergenerational communication. And as we are going down millennials and Gen Z and now alpha generation coming into the mix, it's like, okay, let me drop it in. And then whatever it says, you are taking it as the ultimate truth. And that's where the critical danger lies. And I've been seeing that humans are losing their piece of critical thinking. So the key is that in a couple of places where I've helped implement it is one philosophy. First thing, human in the loop. You cannot outsource completely. And as you mentioned, Bruce, is having it challenge you. Because if you look at, even So for example, just recently when I was working with a team, they're like, oh, this model is so good. And then they had this conflict. No, Claude is good. Somebody's saying, no, AI Codex is good. I said, how about this? Let's work on your work. Let's take one thing that you all need to deliver as a team. And why don't you all use different models with the same intake? And then the key is that as we are talking about the decision making and conflict, what I'm doing with my clients is helping them build metacognitive skills, because it is not what you think, it is how you think about thinking. And as they put it in, they saw the differences and they saw the capacity of each model, because it has been designed by humans. I mean, of course, it's another thing now. Anthropic is building upon itself. Like 80% of coding for Anthropic's growth was done by Claude in the month of May. So that's another story. But even given that, it's very important to keep on building critical thinking in our humans. Because if we lose that, then wrong decisions will be made. Because just recently, Claude deleted one company's whole data.
Yeah, I heard about this.
It's still like, you got to have the guardrails. You got to have, I say, trust but verify.
Yeah. Where do you think some of this is going to go? I one of my kind of things I've been playing around with, I'm not sure exactly if and how I'll implement it, but I've actually gotten to the point of thinking about having Claude in my meetings, right? Actually, having an iPad up there that, listening, responding, right? Because I do find, it is another perspective, right? And it has a different kind of capability. It has obviously kind of data and access, but the reason I'm playing with it, or what I'm kind of curious about it, is how will it change the rest of the team's nature of debate, right? Like if we have AI actually in the debate process, what would happen to everyone else's response to it, and what role will it play? But I think it's a fascinating kind of experiment for me in terms of figure out where it's going to go. Shelby, where do you see kind of the AI kind of playing in terms of teams and debate and conflict?
I think it's an opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity for leaders to show that AI does not have the only answer. And so bringing it into the meetings, going through a workflow, asking questions, how can we use this as a tool? But then to engage in a dialogue about what could be different, or what perspective is this not seeing, or how can we use this differently? Because AI is not disappearing. And if you're not using AI in your company, you're not going to last very long, right? So how do we use that tool and also create that critical dialogue around that? And I think that's a way that leaders can use that to be able to to teach them to have the conversation is one thing, but then to encourage them to use the other thing that I find interesting too is that some I have a couple of team members, like they're almost kind of not afraid to use it, but it's like when they don't, it's not that they don't have the critical thinking skills, but it's like it's the curiosity, right? It's like, oh, well, if I ask it in this way, what happens? Or if I ask it in this way, or like, I've never done an app before. Can I ask Claude to write an app for me? Oh, you sure can. And it's like that discovery and that creativity process that I think is that having those instant answers, it kind of takes away that curiosity. But I think leaders can model that and should model that about how to use that in a more creative fashion. So your workflows are better. So your agents perform better, all of those things. So I think that's a opportunity to mimic or to encourage that creativity, because I mean, that's one thing too, that I think has this limited, so much innovation and amazing things come from conversations. And we have the ideas that feed into Claude and chat and all those things. And when those ideas become stagnant, that's going to be the same thing with AI. So we've got to, as leaders, encourage that conversation. And how do we solve these problems together? And I think that's an opportunity that we have as leaders to be able to engage it as a tool. So
Divya, where do you see this going? What are some of the predictions you have about teams?
My prediction is it'll be situational, contextual. There's no one size fits all. And treating AI as an employee. because it is, think about it, it's like, it's a fresh landscape.
Mm-hmm.
It's about teaching it and onboarding it exactly how you would your employee. And I really loved what you shared, Bruce, that, bring it in your conversation. And you could use it as a moderator, you could use it as a facilitator, because not every team is going to have a coach come in and do that. And the key will be, how are you training AI?
Yeah.
Customizing it and training it in the principles, training it in the dialogues, Shelby, that you mentioned, that how are we modeling it? So that's going to be the critical piece, as to how do we train it, as to how do we help it reason it, so that it's showing up with integrity, transparency, accountability, and building trust in that dialogue.
Yeah. This is good. We're going to hit time here. I want to make sure people get contact information. Divya, if people want to get a hold of you, learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way to get that?
Well, I would say that if you really want to learn about what I'm doing, you can get any of my books. If you just Google up my name, you'll find several books I've written. And as a matter of fact, just recently, a couple of months back, I published the AI Agency. Some of my clients are swearing by it. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's just my name, or reach out to me via my email, contact@divyaparekh.com. And thank you, Bruce, so much for having. It was an insightful and a very good challenging around the challenging topics. Really good, insightful
Perfect.
conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Shelby, if people want to get a hold of you, learn about what you're up to.
Yeah, LinkedIn. I have a YouTube channel, all sorts of things that you can access. My most recent book is Communication is Your Competitive Edge, Embrace the Debate. That's on Amazon, and that's a fun read about how debate can help transform companies. It's pretty exciting. And but you can find me on LinkedIn and all those places, and love to connect.
Perfect. If anyone wants to get a hold of me, just bruce@eckfeldt.com is email. Eckfeldt.com is my website, and obviously on LinkedIn here. Happy to connect with folks. Happy to answer questions. Thank you to the both of you for being on the program today. It was an absolute pleasure. Again, for our audience, if anyone is watching the replay, go ahead and leave comments and questions. The three of us will certainly be monitoring that over the coming days and weeks, and we will get back to you on that. Again, thank you to the two of you, and thank you for everyone listening, and we'll see you on the next LinkedIn Live.
Thank you. Great conversation.
Thanks, everyone.